Imagine waking up tomorrow to a world with, well, absolutely no humanity. No cities buzzing with traffic, no internet, no history being written, just total, absolute silence. Welcome to this explainer, where we're going to dive into a pretty terrifying but honestly fascinating reality. You see, our existence, it's not a given. It's actually a continuing series of massive challenges that we've somehow managed to overcome time and time again.
So, what if humanity almost disappeared? I mean, for most of us, the whole idea of extinction feels like ancient history, right? Something totally disconnected from our comfortable daily lives. It feels literally impossible. But the absolute truth is, we've survived by pure luck, crazy near misses, and just extreme endurance. We have repeatedly stood right on the edge of catastrophe and basically peered over the cliff.
Now, before we look at our own close calls, we really need to nail down what we're actually talking about here. When scientists discuss extinction, they mean the story simply ends, period. There are no survivors miraculously pulling through, no hidden populations plotting some heroic comeback in a secret bunker, no second chances. Once a species is gone, it's gone for good. And it's a stark, brutal fate that's already claimed an enormous percentage of life on Earth.
Just look at this. Around 66 million years ago, a massive asteroid struck our planet. The sky turned dark with ash, the climate completely unraveled, and a staggering 75% of all species simply vanished in the aftermath. Most famously, of course, the dinosaurs. It was a complete reset of the biological clock. But there's a really crucial difference between us and them. Unlike the dinosaurs, we are self-aware. We know what extinction is. We can actually study the fossil record, predict the threats coming our way, and, hopefully, prevent our own end.
All right, let's jump into our first section, surviving nature's deadliest tests.
Way before we had complex cities, concrete walls, or, advanced technology, our ancestors ran a harrowing historical gauntlet. We faced an escalating obstacle course of natural threats. We're talking volcanic winters that literally blocked out the sun, extreme glaciation during repeated ice ages, conditions so harsh they actually outlasted our incredibly adaptable Neanderthal cousins. We survived the bitter cold of all that, only to face the sheer terror of microscopic plagues like the Black Death in the 14th century, which just mercilessly swept across entire continents.
Okay, so 74,000 years ago, the Toba supervolcano erupted with just incomprehensible fury. It choked the global atmosphere with dense ash and plunged the Earth into a brutal, years-long volcanic winter. In the freezing, starving aftermath of that, scientists believe the global human population may have plummeted to just a few thousand individuals. Literally, just a few thousand. Think about that for a second. Every single person alive today is descended from that incredibly tiny, struggling group of survivors who somehow just found a way to keep going.
And even relatively recently, nature has absolutely tested us. The 1918 influenza pandemic infected roughly a third of the entire global population, leaving over 50 million people dead in its wake. It was a terrifying wake-up call, showing exactly how fragile our interconnected modern civilization becomes when we're confronted by widespread, rapidly moving biological threats. And as our world gets more connected, those invisible threats, they travel even faster. Which brings us to our next major era, the nuclear shadow. Right around 1945, the rules of human survival completely changed. We entered an entirely new era where the primary danger profoundly shifted. For millennia, we worried about unpreventable natural disasters, things we can kind of track, like asteroids and volcanoes. But with the splitting of the atom, we suddenly faced preventable but highly unpredictable technological forces. For the very first time in planetary history, a single species had engineered the power of instant self-destruction. During the Cold War, two superpower nations stockpiled enormous nuclear arsenals that literally threatened to shatter modern civilization. But military planners weren't just looking at the immediate horror of cities being erased in blinding flashes of light. No, they were looking at the very real, terrifying possibility of a nuclear winter. It's a scenario where millions of tons of thick black smoke from burning cities gets injected into the stratosphere. It would block the sun for years, causing temperatures to totally plummet, leading to complete climate collapse and ultimately mass global starvation.
This next part is absolutely wild. In 1983, the fate of billions of people relied entirely on the judgment of just one individual. One guy. Soviet early warning officer Stanislav Petrov was on duty in a secret bunker outside Moscow when his system detecting incoming American nuclear missiles. Sirens blared. The red warning screens flashed. The military protocol was absolute. Report the attack and retaliate immediately. But he hesitated. Trusting his human intuition over the machines, he correctly judged the alarm as a super rare, false reflection of sunlight on high-altitude clouds. If he had just followed standard protocol without question, humanity might have ended that very afternoon.
Let's move on to our next section, cosmic and earthly time bombs.
So while we successfully navigated the peak of the nuclear age down here, immense threats from the cosmos continued to loom right over our heads. In 1908, the Tunguska event literally flattened 80 million massive trees across Siberia in an instant, unleashing the energy of hundreds of atomic bombs. Fast forward to 2013, a relatively tiny 20-meter asteroid exploded basically out of nowhere over Chelyabinsk, shattering glass and injuring over 1,000 people just from the sheer force of his shockwave. With thousands of near-Earth objects constantly crossing our orbit, the question isn't really if a major city-killing asteroid will strike, but when.
And back down on Earth, gradual shifts like climate change are acting as massive, slow-moving time bombs. You see, it's not just about the weather. It's a cascading systems failure, like a giant domino effect. Unpredictable food production directly leads to growing water shortages, which forces entire populations to move, intensifying global migration. The greatest danger isn't just a changing physical environment. It's how our incredibly complex, tightly wound societies react to that stress. Because when the system is deeply strained, political stability can unravel incredibly fast.
All right, let's look at what's coming next in the next frontier of risk.
Now we're facing future threats where survival relies entirely on our foresight. Take biotechnology. COVID-19 was a severe systems test, for sure, but thankfully it wasn't an extinction event. However, consider a really dark hypothetical for a second, an ultimate pathogen. Imagine a virus engineered in a lab to have the extreme airborne contagion of measles, the silent, long incubation period of COVID, and the devastating mortality rate of Ebola. This is the danger of dual-use technology. It basically means that the exact same incredible scientific tools we use to cure genetic diseases could, in the wrong hands, easily be used to create deadly traits never seen in nature. We also have to talk about the unprecedented complex risks of artificial intelligence. Now, the true existential concern here isn't about evil conscious machines taking over the world maliciously, like some sci-fi movie. It's actually much simpler than that. It's about misaligned objectives. What happens if a highly capable AI system pursues a poorly defined goal? Because it's so hyper-competent, it could blindly execute a task to perfection, bypassing our safety controls and create massive, harmful, unintended outcomes that we simply cannot reverse in time.
So, where do we go from here? Let's dive into choosing our future.
Looking at all these overlapping cosmic, natural, and engineered threats, we really have to ask a fundamental question about our place in the wider universe. Have you ever heard of the Fermi paradox? It essentially asks why, in a vast universe filled with billions of habitable stars, we haven't seen any evidence whatsoever of advanced alien civilizations. The silence is deafening. One leading theory is the Great Filter, the idea that an incredibly difficult, almost impossible evolutionary barrier destroys civilizations before they can reach the stars. They destroy themselves, exhaust their resources, or invent something fatal. It leaves us to wonder, is our hardest barrier already behind us, or is the true Great Filter still waiting ahead?
But listen, humanity is not helpless. Our greatest advantage has always been our relentless adaptability. Knowing these risks is literally the very first step to surviving them, and we actually have a clear, proactive roadmap forward. Step 1, we can relentlessly monitor space and biological threats before they hit. Step 2, we can strengthen our biosecurity and resource management right here on Earth to build a really resilient foundation. And step 3, eventually we can ensure our long-term survival by expanding beyond our home planet, establishing self-sustaining bases, and becoming a truly multi-planetary species.
I want you to really consider this thought. Every person alive today is part of an unbroken chain of survival, stretching back hundreds of thousands of years. A chain that has never been broken. Not once. Throughout this whole explainer, we've seen that our story isn't about a lucky species that just safely avoided danger. No, it is the profound story of a species that repeatedly faces catastrophic, world-ending danger and somehow, against all odds, endures.
The future remains entirely in our hands. Today, for the very first time in Earth's history, a species possesses the knowledge to actively understand the existential threats it faces. And that unique knowledge brings an immense responsibility. Extinction is absolutely not inevitable. But is survival? So as you look at the world tomorrow, ask yourself, what choices will we make today to ensure that unbroken chain keeps going?